Good morning, Grace Bible Church, and anybody else who might be hanging out with us. We are prepping for our Sunday Recap podcast. Usually try and go live a few minutes before we actually start recording and say hello. So, hello. My face looks so much bigger than everybody else's.
Good morning, everyone.
How does that happen?
I'm just going to stay back like this. Yeah.
I am a sloucher, so I have to slouch.
I'm just going to talk like this the whole time.
There you go. That'll work.
Yeah.
We could
Doesn't
just
look creepy
see
at
your
all.
prescription level is all. I just
This
need
one's
to be
even better.
further away from my camera, and I can't do that. I need to bring my microphone swivel arm thing home so I could be back here.
Oh.
Before you came on, I was looking to say, are there camera adjustments for the MacBook Pro? I don't think there are.
I don't think so.
I mean, you could just physically move it, I think is the only thing, yeah.
Well, I get that.
Oh, I'm not on because I was adjusting my camera, is that why?
No, I just
Was thinking.
wondered
Oh.
why the pictures were different. Thought, maybe there's an adjustment.
Oh, yeah, well, I have a webcam because I'm using
Your
my
background's
desktop.
blurry too, Joey.
Not in my image, that's weird.
Huh.
Comment if you see my background blurry. If you don't,
It is.
then tell me.
Jim, do you see it
It's-
blurry?
It's
Yeah.
blurry.
I think
Yeah.
I know why. Mine looks blurry to you and not in the real one.
Oh, it's not in the real one. Okay.
I think.
Magic.
It's because you're seeing me through Skype, and the eCam's just taking my image. Good
Oh,
content.
there it
to
is.
see.
Uh-huh.
But there you go. To make you happy, I'm unblurred on Skype now too.
Okay.
All right. We only have 2 people watching, so we can pretty much say whatever we want.
Yeah.
The only thing I've
Good.
been wanting to say is muffins.
Muffins.
I forgot to
Muffins.
say it during the thing yesterday.
Mm.
Mm.
All right. Well, I guess we could rip off the Band-Aid and just do this.
Let's do it.
Yep.
Okay. Here come the kids.
This is Sunday Recap. Sunday Recap. A weekly sermon podcast with Dave, Jen, Chris, and Joey. Good show. Heady ho.
Well, good morning. If you just got here, we hung out for a few minutes, but now we are starting the official podcast. If you noticed, Dave's not with us. He wasn't with us yesterday. He's not with us today. Why? Because he is gallivanting around visiting family. I think mostly in Memphis, but also some family, I think, in DFW area. But he's not back yet because he's too cool for school. Or too cool for work, I guess. I don't know. But Elliot can't be here either. He's taking care of Richie Ray. And Kendrick, if you're out there, jump on. It'll make our image way more even because it'll move from the 3 with the long bars to 4 spread out. So then you won't see my face so big when I get close and far away. But we are here to talk about the sermon, and Jim is going to have to do way more talking today than he's used to doing. So get ready for it, Jim. Jim actually stayed and hung out in the lobby with us yesterday, too. I thought, he's not going to want to do this. He's going to be so done by the time he's done with his sermon. So I think I said, you don't have to do it. It's okay. You can just go home. And he did
It was all new to me. It was all new to me looking at the restream and all that stuff. So
I know.
Yeah.
It's a whole nother world. I'll tell you what. What are we on? What week number are we on of this? Do we know?
of COVID.
Yeah.
Wait, I have scratches on my bedroom wall. Let's see.
10? Is that 10 scratches?
Yeah, 10. I think it's 10
10
scratches.
scratches, 20 scratches. I never know when a day starts or ends anyway, so it's not very helpful to have the scratches because I just randomly throughout maybe one day, maybe 6 days, I'm scratching it. I don't know. That was a dumb joke. I'm really good at dumb jokes. But hello, everybody. We're glad you're here. We are talking this week, our final week, actually, of True Unity. the series from 1 Corinthians, the first 4 chapters. So Dave bailed on the last week because he knew it would be the hardest week, and he got Jim to do it instead. So, how do I usually do this? I'm so out of sorts today. I say that every week, though, so, it's just my brand, I guess. Well, this week we talked about humility and how it ends division. So your sermon title was Humility Ends Division. Jim, you want to talk anything about your sermon title? Why you chose that? What it was kind of like?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because this part of the discussion by Paul really doesn't give a lot of practical advice to other believers besides the Corinthians, right? He's just saying, this is the way you're acting, and this is the way we live, and I'm going to come visit you as a father, And so I had to work at being more abstract in my thinking so we could apply it to us, and therefore it changed from talking about the historical, what was written, as much, and talking a lot more about, so what changes needed to be made in order for those people to be what Paul was asking them to be in following Jesus. And that's why I ended up with Humility Ends Division, because that was the big problem. The whole 4 chapters was about quarrels and conflict and division. And pride had been talked about from the very beginning in chapter 1. So that's why we ended up there.
And, go ahead. I was just going to say, it feels like, never mind. I said go ahead, and then I started talking. I was going to say that it feels, you mentioned that it's very applicable today, especially in our nation and what's going on. And I know it feels obvious to ask that, but what are those things for people who might be listening in the future?
Oh, the fact that there are lots of divisions based on perceived oppression, this discrimination that's been going on, things that have been happening in the news with black guys getting killed by cops seemingly unjustly. And I'm not saying that to say it's not. I'm just saying there's still judgment that has to come, and people have to, go through the whole process to see if justice can be achieved. And then in the midst of that, we've got all these riots going on because of Mr. Floyd's death. And so we're in a really, and the pandemic as well. I mean, it's the same thing. People are really divided over what that's about, what's happening, and what we're allowed to do and what they're saying you can do. There's just a lot of division going on right now. And I felt like it was really important that we acknowledge it. And acknowledge that, we are in here with you, thinking and praying about this, and praying for our brothers and sisters in Christ who are affected in really negative ways by this.
Sorry, Chris.
Oh, that's okay. My comment doesn't make sense anymore. No, I'm just joking. I guess the place my head went first was I was wondering if we could wrangle a definition of pride, kind of a modern, common. What are we talking about? I think you did a great job talking about humility, and I wanted to also stare at, what's the enemy? What does pride actually mean?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting because back in the 80s, this thing came around called self-esteem, and pride used to be seen as a very negative thing. Prior to that, and pride was when you were puffed up, you were inflated in your opinion of yourself and the things you could do and the things you had accomplished, and you were accused of boasting, being arrogant. Those are some other words that associated with pride. But when self-esteem came along, then people were told that if you have low self-esteem, that causes problems. That's why people rob banks. That's why people hurt other people, because they have low self-esteem, and that leads them to do that. And so we need to raise their self-esteem so that their view of themselves is higher and their self-worth is more. And Tim Keller addresses that in his book, The Freedom of Self-Forgetfulness, and talks a lot about it. But I didn't want to go down that road because I didn't want to spend so much time on the negative aspect. I want to focus on the positive aspect of, okay, what should we be?
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, and that's not the dictionary definition of pride, but I think you can understand it in that way, I hope.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, I mean, and you talked about it. That was your first illustration image that you put up, right? The weather balloon of getting puffed up and
Right.
expanding and then popping.
That was so vivid. I loved it.
Yeah, it's good. I was actually wondering about those balloons. The thing that's hanging down from the bottom, what happens to them when the balloon pops?
It falls to the earth.
Yeah.
And it's not very big. I mean, it's like a good-sized coffee can. But people actually go around and retrieve those things. I don't know how there's actually I think you can Google it about the weather balloons and that particular thing and how to find that device. I didn't want to go there. I don't care what happens.
It just seems dangerous. Okay.
Yeah, I think the number's like 900 a day in the U.S.
Fascinating.
It's very, I don't know how I feel about that. Anyways, U.S. is big, and 900 isn't that many compared to our size, but seems like probability would strike at some point. Sorry, I did have a question about you. I'm pointing because it matters. You, Chris, and your song choice for the children's song. So you chose "Where Your Treasure Lies, There Your Heart Will Be Also," and obviously fits the sermon. And I'm assuming that's at least somewhat why you chose it. I'm just wondering also too, thoughts on that in relation to all the division and tension that's going on. Like, it seemed extra fitting when I don't know how to say this. Seems extra fitting when there's a lot of concern about buildings that are being broken and burned, and where's our treasure lying, if that makes sense. I don't know if you had thoughts on why you picked it or anything like that, but I thought it was extra fitting this week.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I would love to hear your thoughts in a second. It's always a triangulation of fun songs with hand motions, songs I can learn, songs I know, and then songs that fit the sermon. And so, yeah, I think I was thinking about. I didn't know how much it would connect in a kid's head. So maybe, yeah, a lot of these thoughts are very abstract. But I was thinking to the previous passage where Paul was talking about I don't even condemn myself. I'm not judged by anybody else. Like, so there is this like sense of, if pride is our hope, if our own self-worth is our hope, even those things can be attacked by our own the thief of our own mistake, the thief of other people judging us and rightly judging us, and so that can be shaken and taken away really easily. So if we're storing up treasures just in our own heads and feeling good about ourselves, that's going to be taken away and rust and be destroyed very easily. So I guess that was kind of as far as I got it. Then I was like, oh, and there are hand motions and it's a fun song. So but yeah, what do you guys get out of it? That's very interesting to me.
No, I mean, the only thing I was thinking is it seemed very poignant based on what was happening in the world the last couple of days, that one of the big calls that people are making is like, stuff is burning and vandalism is happening, and I know that most people would say that's not good, let's not do that, but it does also seem like people are putting that as their treasure and not treasuring, what is more important. So that's all. I don't know.
Cool.
Rough connection, but
dig it.
It seemed pretty pointed.
That's the good thing with Scripture, right?
It can do that.
Never returns void. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good.
Okay. Well, points. Now that we've gotten the main title and randomness out of the way, all our randomness is done for the rest of this episode. So thank you for joining us on our random trails. And
Awesome.
Make no promises.
yeah. All right. Point number 1, humility accepts God's gifts. Point number 2, humility imitates Jesus' followers. Point number 3, humility loves others. Anything overarching about your points, or we can jump right into them?
Well, I wanted to focus on the whole thing of humility. What does it do, and how does that end division? And I want to make, my goal, of course, is to be clear enough so that people could see at the end, okay, this is really how this works. Now, I don't know if I got there, but that was my attempt. Yeah, and I did see a progression in the text that I was working against, because the Corinthians had all this giftedness, and Paul tells them at the beginning of the book, you've been given all these gifts from God. These are wonderful gifts. And then in the last chapter, in chapter 3, he says, you have everything, right? And the problem is that they were claiming these gifts as evidence of their superiority instead of accepting them as gifts from God. And that's why, I start out with that, because that's the first thing Paul addresses in his sarcasm is, we have these gifts too, but look how we live, right? We're not living as superior individuals. We're living as servants and stewards and things like that. So, yeah.
It's good.
All right. First point, humility accepts God's gifts. I don't know. I think, any thoughts on this point? I'll let you guys start. I've talked way too much already.
I mean, I'll just say the first place my mind goes is, for years and years, we've kind of shot for a liturgy in our services that starts with creation, and so I've pondered a lot about that. Why that's historically been done? Why is that helpful? Why is that good? And I just come back again and again to this. If we don't believe God made us and He's the one giving the gifts, then we don't owe Him anything. But if we believe that He created us and everything, and every breath is a gift, that completely sets the tone. That's the landscape of the story, and everything else is affected by that. And so yeah, obviously, if we don't owe anything to God, we don't owe Him worship. There's no reason to be humble. We are in competition with Him. But instead, when we know that He is the good God who we owe everything to, then we must be humble because He is great and we are not, and His greatness is what puts our own lives into context.
Yeah, I almost went back to creation on that as well, thinking back to Adam and Eve and the temptation by the serpent, because what he was attempting to do was to inflame their pride in saying that God isn't really as good as you think He is, and that is, where we all started having a pride problem. But I just thought, well, it's going to take too long to connect the dots on that. So, so I didn't go there. But
yeah,
I think some of it too is where we're putting our focus, right? Like, are we looking at ourselves and worrying about ourselves?
Right.
I mean, man.
Well,
I love.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm just thinking the world constantly builds us up as individuals. You can do anything, those kinds of comments. And there is a bit of truth in capability, because God has gifted us as people, but it's not true. Right? We can't do anything. We do have limitations. And God-given limitations. He created all of us with limitations, so we have to acknowledge that we owe Him the positive and the weaknesses, and the weaknesses enable us to trust Him more.
Yeah, that's so good. It makes me think of one of my favorite things is talking about, we're studying the Bible. Are we the main character of the story? And that's such a huge thing, and all of this plays into that of what a comfort it is that we aren't the hero of the story. That really, like, and we really are taught in our society that we must be the hero, but guess what that means? That it all falls on whether we're good enough and big enough and strong enough. And at some point in your life, you realize, I'm not. Whoa, what's going to happen now, right? Or we're not, right? As a society, as we see ourselves, attacking each other and being evil to each other and not being gracious. And it's like, well, wait, who's going to save us then? If we're the main character, But anyway, I've just been thankful of that lately, especially.
Yeah.
And the next level of that too is that who we usually think of as the main character in the stories aren't necessarily the main character either. Like, what are all of them pointing to?
Yeah.
So.
Yep.
Nothing in our lives that we did not receive from God. He made us, He supplies us, He gave us. I think you already talked about that.
Yeah. Well, I think too, I meant to tie this together too. When Jim mentions the Keller freedom of self-forgetfulness, I think the only way to be self-forgetful is to have something more beautiful to look at, right? And so that's why this is such a great beginning place for humility. It's not just tearing ourselves down, or it is looking at someone greater, and that's what gives us hope, and that's what true beauty is. And we don't earn God's gifts. Like even saying you said, Jim, we don't earn His favor by our good behavior. Well, what is good behavior until you compare it to God's good behavior, and then you realize, oh, my good behavior is
it's filthy rags.
Not so good.
Right.
Yeah.
So super helpful.
Well, your first point is basically humility. Let me find. You wrote it somewhere. Let me look. Humility acknowledges that all we have is from God. I think.
Yeah, it really comes down to being thankful, right? Because it's easy to take for granted the environment in which we live, and the stuff that we have, and the incredible benefits. We do live as kings in the United States, right? We're top 2% of the population in the world in terms of individual wealth, right? And so compared to the rest of the world, we do live as kings. That's and it's really hard for us to imagine that that's the case, but we are so blessed, and yet we just look for more and more and more stuff, right? And we keep filling up our lives with stuff, thinking that if I get this, I'll be satisfied, and failing to acknowledge that God has given us everything we have. And if we are thankful for it, it enables us to then respond to Him in relationship differently. It really is the trigger for us responding to God, right? To know that He's given us stuff, and to acknowledge it, and to be thankful for it. That's what triggers our love relationship with Him, I think.
And there's always something to be thankful for too. I was thinking, so we find ourselves in a era of prosperity, and we also find ourselves in a wondering if that's going to last or what that's going to look like. But yeah, there's always something to be thankful for. It made me think of The Hiding Place, Corrie ten Boom. And there's there's this amazing section in the story where Corrie and her sister are in a concentration camp, and she gets taken to her, there's like 3-level bunks and just packed in this room, and she lays down, and there's just fleas everywhere.
Right.
I don't know if you remember this part. And
yep.
Yeah, and so she's just miserable, but her sister just has this strange faith that God is always working, God is always good, and eventually it becomes this thing where the guards won't even go into the concentration camp because of the fleas everywhere, and so they're able to hold these secret Bible studies, and it's like they find themselves thanking God for fleas because it allowed them to get together and study His Word, and it's just like, oh my goodness. So yeah, it's not even just we can thank God in prosperity, but with that perspective of faith, you can thank Him for things that seem crazy otherwise, right?
Yeah.
I know in the sermon you did the 1,000 gifts idea as an application. What are some other ways besides that you can foster humility and or recognition of God's gifts?
Well, I think one of the things I said was, sit down someplace and think about your accomplishments and how did those happen? What did God give you as a unique person that enabled you to do the things that you do that it would be very easy to take pride in? And so it may have been as a student or as a family member or as somebody in a professional thing. Sometimes we have these plaques on the wall, right? As military guys do anyway. We get lots of these things. And we can put all those on the wall and claim that, look, I did such a great job. And you may have, right? You may have done a great job, but who got you there? I mean, truthfully, it is only by God's grace that we get there, because we could fail just like anybody else. We all have weaknesses and strengths, and I think I don't want to play it up as you need to diminish yourself, because that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about just acknowledging that God made you the person you are. So if you have incredible gifts in leadership, that was God's gift to you. If you have incredible gifts in organization, it's God's gift to you. If you are a technology wizard, God gave you that ability to do that. Now you may have stewarded that gift so that you become better at it. And some people have wasted their gift, right? On the other hand. So I think that's really one of the best ways we can start to admit that I'm not as big as I think I am. I'm not as self-sufficient as I think I am, because God's been at work in my life. And it's easier to look back sometimes and see it than it is to think about, well, right now, what's happening. I don't know if that's a satisfying answer to your question, Joy.
Yeah, I mean, I guess a follow-up for either of you is, how do you either allow someone to speak into your life about humility and your humility, or what venue can one speak into somebody else's life on that? It seems like it's a personal, touchy issue, almost, if that makes sense. What do you guys think? Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, that's a good question.
I guess I'm trying to, I'm just thinking out loud. I tend to come from the other land of not, they're both self-focused, but not so much, I think I'm great, but I think I'm really not great. And so I don't struggle so much as like I'm better than other people, but I do, I guess, I don't know that I've like been great at inviting that commentary into my life, but I have had friends that for sure, I think, God has brought people into my life like Dave, who were like, hey, stop second guessing everything and just like rejoice in who God's made you and stop only hearing the negative, but be free, right? Be free of just focusing on yourself. And so I've needed encouragement more than being put my bubble popped, I guess. I've needed some inflation from time to time. I'm the balloon on the ground already. So that's harder for me to say, I guess. And maybe it's an encouragement to maybe pursue that in a more systematic or routine way. Sure.
Yeah, I think, what I'm thinking of is suffering you go through sometimes as a way of illuminating things that God has redeemed in your life that humble you, because you say, oh, even in the midst of my complaining, in the middle of this suffering that I was going through, God was at work doing something to increase my capacity in another regard, to give me a gift of something that would have been absolutely negative were it not been for God in my life. And I think sometimes those things are hard to find, and we have to ask God, show me what happened there. Show me why the question that started me down this road was, how did I become the person that I am? And I think it's a good question to ask ourselves, how did I get here? Yeah, because there's things that happen in our life that we just want to put aside and forget they ever happened. But if we have to think about them, then we can go through this process of saying, okay, where was God in that? This was a horrible thing. I hated to go through it. But was God in the middle of that? Because he promises that he is, right? And then we can start to see that sometimes there are incredible things that God does in the midst of suffering. And I think that's why I see in Paul's life, because all the time he's acknowledging, yeah, I live this way, but this is a momentary affliction, right? And yeah.
That's good. Yeah, the visual that comes to mind, I was thinking about, this becomes such a unifying thing. Why does this become such a unifying thing to be thankful and to have God in the picture, right? And the visual that comes to mind is, right, like if you have a graph and you have 2 points on the graph, right? I rank at a 4 for eloquence, and you rank at a 3, right? And if you only have 1 through 5 as the view on the graph, that looks like a pretty big difference, right? Mm-hmm. If that's all we're looking at. But then if you zoom out and there's a 3rd point on the graph of God's eloquence, and it's 100 billion, then guess what happens? Your 2 dots come really close together and really close to the bottom. And God is the new standard of this crazy spike of gloriousness. And I think that's what unites us, right? So we stop being proud because, oh, guess what? I'm just like the person next to me. I'm not 30% of the graph above him. I'm down at the bottom just like everybody else, and God's way at the top. And the same thing, we don't have to be jealous, right? Like that's another thing we struggle with big time, is like, why did he get that? And why did I not get it? Whether that's, personality traits or worldly wealth or whatever it is. I think that's part of why it unifies us, because we find out we're all in the same boat compared to where God is.
I like that because it shows that we are all on more of a level playing field. We are all gifted by God, and the perspective that God is, because of there is no gift he lacks, right? It
adjusts to a much more eternal perspective. Point 2.
Let's do it.
Humility imitates Christ followers. And I will say, to start off, I initially was a little confused by the wording of this one. I thought it was a typo. I thought it was humility imitates Christ, and followers was on accident. So can you help me work through that? I mean, to be fair, I've worked through that.
It's kind of funny. Well, there are people. I was in a class way back, this is a long time ago, and the folks who were teaching the class were teaching, you should never ask people to imitate you. And I started looking at Paul, and I'm like, wait a minute, this guy says like more than half a dozen times, follow me, imitate me as I follow Christ. And so I go, how would we get to the point where we say, don't ever say imitate someone else? And that's why I did it the way I did it, because God puts other people in our life who are following Christ that can teach us stuff. We're not getting cloned. We're growing to maturity because we see things that are lacking in our life by looking at others' lives and say, oh, that's the way it's done. And so, I was kind of pushing the point because we can't learn everything on our own. We just can't. It's part of community as well. And I really didn't spend a lot of time on that aspect of it, but it is a community issue where that's why we have small groups. That's why we get together and talk about stuff and hear things from another person's perspective. And that's why we pray for each other, because that's how growth happens, is in community. And so we are, whether we like it or not, we're going to imitate other people.
That's so big. Wow. I mean, that's a part of humility too, to say, there's something I can learn from this person. We want to be, or I don't know if you guys do this, but I have this Platonic ideal of, I will follow Jesus, the perfection. But sometimes we need to know, like say in this current situation of upheaval in our country, it's so helpful to have a human being to look to and to trust that God's working in other godly people. And I can say, okay, let me look around and see the people who truly love God and love people and want to follow him. And that's a specific example, because we don't know exactly what Jesus would do. We know in general how he would act, but yeah, that's kind of a hands and feet thing going on. Pretty big.
This may be a reason why people don't like to say it, but it also puts pressure on the individual that, man, if I'm a Christ follower, other people are going to be following me, right? And so now there's pressure on me to do this right, and so they're like, I don't want to say that, I don't want to touch that, but that's good pressure,
Yeah, it's a kind of accountability I think is most practical, because the pressure comes from your relationship with God to say, I want to represent you well. It's not I want to impress those people who are following me, right? Because that would put us in the pride category. To say, I want to represent God well, so I want to do this the way Jesus would do it. And so that allows us to be in a less likely mode of lying about what we're doing, right? Or living a false life before people. It actually enables us to admit, I'm screwed up. I'm broken, just like everybody else. We don't have to put on this false pressure of, I have to be perfect. Somebody might be looking at me and following me.
That's good.
Something, great cloud of witnesses, something.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
All right. What else about this point? I stopped looking at your notes because we were talking, and I was interested, and now I need to get back to the notes.
Yeah, well, I don't have them in front of me, so.
It's okay. You talked about your friend Walter Parsons at this point, but that was really, it was a great example, but it was just an example of what we're talking about, so I don't know that we need to.
Right.
And your application was to do it, right? Your application was to do it. That's great. Just do it. Sorry, your application was more along the lines of a little bit about being community, and then even almost, I felt, mentor-mentee type things. Is that kind of an
Yeah, that's what we call it today. We use that term. I don't think there's anything wrong with looking for people like that and calling them mentors and asking them to mentor you. I do think there's something valuable in having a spontaneous relationship with someone like that, where you didn't even start out looking for a mentor. You just saw somebody, hey, I like that guy. He follows Jesus, and hang out with them. And there's different ways to approach that. But like I said, we're not being cloned. We are doing what God wants us to do to learn more about our relationship with Him. So that's going to come in all different packages. And I just, I started thinking back on my life. There's just a multitude of people who have been those for me. Some stand out more than others because I spent a lot more time with some others. But I think if we are more aware of it, being more aware that I'm learning something by watching this person and imitating them, my behavior's being changed because of what I see in them. It is also a Jesus trait. I think that's really helps us to grow and to pay more attention in community. And it takes away the competition thing, because we're all learning, we're all growing.
And I think it makes me think of a word of caution or finesse maybe too, as you're looking for those mentors, right? Our society upholds the flashy, showy, the powerful, right? I mean, humans always have. I want to be like the guy with 1,000 followers who's standing on the stage under the lights, and I guess I feel like, I want to make that warning of I've noticed in my life the people I probably should be looking for as a mentor are the ones who don't think they're worthy of it, or are unassuming, or to follow a mentor of humility is almost can be a harder thing to find. Do you guys have any like advice on that? Like, how do you find those people, or have you experienced that, the difference between I just want to be the popular guy versus I want to be a guy, follow someone of character?
Yeah. Well, I just know I have had one of those in my life where, man, a guy taught me an incredible amount, but in the end, he was off someplace where I'm like, how did you get to that point where you did stuff that that you don't even want to talk about? You just go, that's so weird. It just was bizarre. And I know Dave has told me a story about one of his guys that doesn't even believe anymore. That was a guy that he really respected and was teaching him a lot. Yeah, I don't have a great answer for it. I mean, but I do think that it is important that we don't look at people and think because they're in the spotlight that they are therefore never going to fall, right?
Well, and I guess I think I want to like, I see us losing the we don't see the glory of a quiet, humble life, just a person that pours into their family in a not flashy way, and a person who just lives with consistent character, but never sings a solo on a stage. And I just think I just think as a society that's a trap we could fall into, is there's those people who everybody wants them to be their mentor because they want to be cool and well liked like them, and then there's just surely so many just quiet, steady, faithful people who could teach us so much, but we might have to hunt them down.
Well, I think part of it too is once the first point of recognizing it and seeing it and thanking God for gifts, once you start to do that, then you start to see it in other people. You're like, oh, that person is really like that. Like I wasn't paying enough attention before, or my eyes weren't open to it before. And so I would say those people are around, but we don't see them often because we see the flashy one. So I don't know if that makes sense or not, but
no, it does. It does make sense. I had a thought there, but lost it. Well,
sorry, but
tomorrow it will come back.
Come back at noon.
Well, I think just one last thought I had in hanging in the lobby last week. It was asked, how do you combat pride? And I think one of the things that came to mind to me that Dave has mentioned before is that sweep the floors, I think, is how he took it from somebody, but that idea of never be above menial tasks that need to be done, as a way of remembering you're not something special. You just maybe have been given a special platform by God or something, but don't be above those just as important menial tasks that nobody sees. And so that, I guess that's what I would tie into, is like, don't just look to the person with the microphone as your mentor. Look to the person with the broom in their hand, the person like the person who's there the first thing in the morning when the church opens to sweep things and empty trash, right? Like that can be, I think of the kingdom of God as the upside down kingdom, right? Those could be the people who are really with huge reward in heaven for sweeping floors. And some people got the reward on earth with accolades of men, and that's all they're going to get, when they were standing up front. But anyway, enough said there. But
well, I think Keller makes a point of this. He actually took it from C.S. Lewis, that if you ever meet a really humble person, you would probably not like them. and it's because they're not going to tell you about themselves. They're just so interested in you. They're just asking you questions about yourself. They're trying to understand you, and you wouldn't recognize them as necessarily humble, but you recognize them as people who care about other people.
You mean there are good quality people who don't have their own blog with 1 million followers, Jim?
What's a blog? No.
He means podcast.
They went out of style a way back. Yeah, they become podcasts. Yeah.
Oh man.
All right.
Influencers. They're the influencers. You don't. Yeah. Heavenly influencers are not the same as Instagram influencers. Just saying.
I don't even understand that term, influencer. Anyways, point 3, humility loves others. We had a great transition, but you ruined it, Chris.
Oh, do it.
It's okay. I can't do it now.
Cut out my part.
It was okay. I don't even remember what it was, but Jim said something. I was like, perfect transition, and then we made a joke about Instagram influencers, but it's okay. All's forgiven. All right.
Yeah, thanks for the public shame, though. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. It's what I'm here for. I'm just trying to keep you humble. All right.
Thanks.
Point number 3, humility loves others. That was so dumb. I'm so dumb. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. I'm just going to click out of the podcast now. All right.
Yeah, it's all good.
Humility, thanking God, and learning to follow Jesus by imitating others enables us to love others, to follow the greatest commandments. I mean, that's really what your sermon is today, right? Love God and love others. And to stop worrying about yourself, I guess.
Yeah, well, I got to get my mind back since the telephone rang.
Sorry, I didn't even hear it. You did a good job covering it up. We would have never known.
Yeah.
It's okay. I was just being mean to Chris while you were gone anyway. So.
Well, what I was trying to get from the passage is, Paul for 3.5 chapters has been hammering the Corinthians on their pride and their attitude toward each other and their competition, things like that. And now he totally changes it, and after all that sarcasm where he says, oh, you're kings, so I wish we were kings, and now he says, I just want to help you get to be what you need to be. And he changes his whole tone, and says, I'm your spiritual father. I can't help but take care of you. That's what God put me here for, is to love you and to care for you, even if you are not being what you're supposed to be. And I think that's why I went that direction, is because Paul he's really loving them, even though he's threatening discipline. He deals with your kids, right? You want them to mature, so you use discipline as a tool to love them into being on the right path. And that's why I chose that and was working hard to get to the point that, yes, once we've become those humble people who thank God for what we have and we follow other people, we are naturally going to love other people.
I think that's a really good point, because looking at Paul, but looking at Paul, we often look at humility and think, well, humility is not going to correct other people. Humility is not gonna tell other people they're wrong. Humility, we have this weird view of humility where I just need to be quiet and stay alone and not speak up against things or against ideas. That's not humility, at least how Paul is being humble, right? Or am I wrong?
Well, yeah, our modern definition of humility, when you look into the thesaurus and the dictionary, it's really misleading in terms of biblical humility. And the thing that I gather from the Bible is humility is really having a correct analysis of our relationship to God, right? It's really seeing ourselves in relation to God in a proper way. It's too often it's taken as meekness, submission. The other words they use, they're all words that say, oh, you're just a lowly thing. You know, you're a mouse in a corner. You know, it doesn't give you the picture of when you look at Moses. Okay, how could a Moses write about himself? Moses was the meekest of all men. You know, humility was the idea, right? Yet he does, and then you look at his life. Here's this guy who's leading 2 million people across the desert for 40 years, who goes into the court of Pharaoh and, you know, has the boldness to say, you need to let God's people go. And humility is different than our modern generation thinks it is.
So good. Sometimes humility calls you to step up onto the stage and to do the hard conversation.
Yeah.
Because that's what you're called to do. Yeah. Because I can see again from the other direction where you don't struggle with pride, you struggle with self-hatred or something like that. Mm-hmm. You can be so worried of what you'll look like in that hard conversation that you won't have it. And that's saying I care more about me than about what needs to be done, instead of saying what I look like and what they think of me is not as important as doing the right thing and really loving them in a way like Paul's doing, being speaking truth even when it's uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, speaking of uncomfortable truths, guys, I'm just kidding. Sorry.
Segue to what?
Whenever I start to, man, your faces made me go abort, 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 abort. I'm sorry. Okay, cool. Are we done? Just kidding. What else about this point?
What were you gonna say?
No, I wasn't gonna say anything. It was a joke. But as soon as I started to say it, your faces went, what is he about to say? And so I was like, just stop talking. I'm kidding. It was a joke. All right.
That's so
cool. That's great. We're on fire. Dave, come back.
That's what happens when you put 3 introverts in the podcast with no one else.
Works really well. It's okay. Nobody can judge me because they wouldn't be being humble if they were. No, I'm humble. I'm not worrying about what you're thinking. Oh, man, this is great. All right, what else about this point?
Good.
I'm trying to read through your notes.
We are humbly spitballing. That's what's going on here.
Yeah.
Kendrick Elliott, we need you.
Yes. So we're on point 3.
Yeah.
Application? Where's the application?
In the very bottom. Page 9 of 10.
I see it. What would it be like if instead of defending your views about the pandemic or current racial tensions, you sat down with someone from a different tribe and asked, how is this affecting you? So good. Yes. So good.
I kind of stole it from somebody who stole it from somebody else, but it was a really great thing about conflict that was going on within a leadership role, and instead of going in and lambasting somebody with your point of view, they just went and sat down and said, how is all this affecting you? Changed the whole conversation. And the funny thing was, my son, about 2 weeks after that, had the same stuff going on and tried it with another thing that was going on. And he said it was just amazing how it changed the whole relationship and help them work through some stuff that they've been working on for a year now, trying to sort it out. And I thought, how interesting when we start to really deal with people's emotions about what's going on, instead of dealing with how we can defend our side of what's going on, we can really get to a different place, or else get to a solution or understanding that we didn't have before. So that's why I went to that application. I think especially in our time right now, we need to be doing that with people, because none of us is totally right.
Yeah, I would say, and don't give in to the idea that, like, this, I don't know, that there's no room for discussion, I guess, or don't give in to the idea that there's no room for learning from the other side, or don't give in to the idea that, like, I don't know, anger and hate is the only option, if that makes sense. I don't know. It just feels like we're so divided that it's like, nope, everything that this other camp does has to be stupid and has to be dumb and can't be right and can't be good. It's like, it's rough, man.
Yeah. And as you do that, as you ask for their perspective too, I'm aware of, you still have to be trusting God with all justice too, of like, because I think there's a danger of, I'm going to go in and ask for your opinion, and then of course you're going to let me spend 30 minutes on my opinion, which may not happen. And are we going to be okay with that when all I get to do is listen? Because that really could happen. And I think that's okay. If, as I ask those questions of, can you help me understand, that's not just a bait and switch for me to tell you what I think. That's for me to actually humbly try to understand what you think. And yeah, hopefully we'll be a two-way street, but that doesn't always happen.
Well, and what I was trying to get at was to ask for not their opinion, but to ask them how personally, how are you? I couldn't phrase the question the way I really wanted to come out. That is, how are you really feeling about this? How is your heart in the middle of this?
Yeah.
Because I think that gets us into a different discussion, rather than being, just talking about, well, I think and you think, and that.
Well,
I just think sometimes. Yeah.
I think even the difficulty in you forming the question is because it's become so inseparable to have a feeling about something and a belief about something, or it's become inseparable, and that's it's not okay. I think another way too that's helpful is, but maybe as in addition to, or as another option, is like, okay, let's get together and you explain my side to me and let me explain your side to you, and then you start to see like, man, we probably don't even have the same understanding of what we think each other thinks and feels.
Sure.
Like, how do you think I'm feeling? How do I think you're feeling? Like, man, empathy is definitely part of humility.
Yep.
Good.
Yep, I think we're running out of steam, guys. We're getting close. We got to finish. We're almost there.
All right.
Really
what
good.
do we got? What do we got? Because
Well, I don't know. Can you think of some more applications there? It's how do we? What's the question? How do I grow in love? Right? How do I love other people? I think.
and
well,
in
that's part of
godliness,
our
love and
definition
godliness.
issue.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's part of our definition problem, right? Modern definition of love is, I have nice feelings all the times towards you. And it's really, no, I have right actions towards you all the time. That's what our goal is, right? To do the right thing, knowing that cares for people. We may have good feelings, may not.
Well, think, say, and do. Right. That's the
Right.
that's the idea behind action. That word can be broken up. Think, say, and do the right things about people and do people. Because you can do the right actions and be thinking the wrong things, or say the right things and be doing the wrong. It goes hand in hand. But
Yeah.
hand in hand, hand in glove. What's the right phrase? It doesn't matter.
You're both right.
There's no baseball, so I just can't use hand in glove. All right. Anything else?
I think.
There's 3 points on the bottom. Let me read them. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah. I think my thinking and what I've been pondering and kind of praying about, I just we talked about it a little bit in hanging in the lobby yesterday, but social media is a dangerous place. I mean, I just it's this equivalent of people shouting in a room and people throwing grenades and hurting people they didn't intend to. And I think one thought I've just been pondering is that I think it kind of ties into this whole humility conversation, because basically, does reality matter more, or does the things on social media matter more? As far as, if you find yourself searching social media and reading what people say, and you come to a opinion about that, and then you go and talk to them in real life, and that is not at all reality. Like that what they meant to say, who they are, what's real is so much more important than what you felt was real in that moment. And if those things keep being different, right, like what you think someone is like on social media versus who they actually are, then the problem is the problem is the medium. Like,
Dude, just
and maybe you just
delete
need
it.
to
Just
read
delete
less, man.
Facebook.
Read less, and I just want to encourage everybody. Remember, when you post on social media, you're shouting in a room, and people are going to hear you that you never thought were going to hear you. And so I just think we need to be a lot more careful. I mean, there's got to be a way to continue to try to raise awareness of things, but just be careful. You just gotta. I think early on, I mean, I'm kind of half terrified every time we make this podcast because we don't know who the recipient is actually going to be. It's not the same as I know I'm talking to Joey. It's I'm now talking to somebody in some other country that I never knew was going to hear the sound of my voice, and so still prayerfully worth trying to do it. But I'm always trying to keep that in mind. What if the person who hates me listens to this? What are they thinking? Or the person who completely disagrees with everything I'm saying, am I still trying to show love in the way that I'm saying it? So, again, I know we probably all need to take a break.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. One of the struggles is that you have all these real friends, relational friends that you've known physically, right? They're not just people that grabbed your photo and said, "Oh, I'd like to like that person."
Sure.
And so we try to keep up with them because Facebook enables that, and I'm really torn because if I get rid of that Facebook thing, then I don't have the contact that I have with those people and see what's going on in their lives. And so, and we don't quite know what to do with that because they kind of got us.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's I guess my question really is how do we browse the internet and social media as Christians? Like, because I think more and more we've wanted in the past to think I can just come on mindlessly and without putting on the armor of God, right? Like I can just come into this situation and just meander around and just have my instincts and do what I want to. But more and more, I think it is becoming a moment of I have to put on the armor of God as I enter this realm. And I still, again, we want it to be like a real interaction with a real person. And if that's so, I have to say, how do I do this as Jesus would do this? I can't just go by instinct because my heart is deceitful, So I'm sure there will be a lot more conversations about that. And it's funny because people are watching us on Facebook right now. Hi, guys.
I know.
Be Jesus out there.
Well, let's end with, Jim, will you give your answer for how humility ends division? Can we end with that?
Yeah. Humility ends division because we become thankful to God for what He's given us and is giving us every day. That stops us from comparing ourselves with others. We're all under the mighty hand of God when we do that. Humility ends division when we recognize that we have things to learn, and we can learn it from other people who are following Jesus. That enables us to humble ourselves, admitting that we don't know everything, and others who we may not have thought about could teach us things. And finally, humility ends division because we can love other people when we are humble, when we recognize that God has loved us incredibly through Jesus, beyond what we can ever imagine. And so we can pass it on to other people because His grace flows to us since we trust Him and know Him, and we can give it to other people because of that. That's how it ends division.
Well, thanks. Y'all go out and be the church. Do the work. We love you guys. Miss you guys. We will see you. What is today? I don't even know what today is. Monday. We'll see you sometime this week probably, and then we'll see you again Sunday at 10:45 for our live stream. find it on Facebook or YouTube or bgrace.org/live. We will talk to you all later.